Hello everyone, this is Gary from the Seer's Cave, and over the past period of time I've had a lot of questions about my tarot decks and my oracle decks, and which ones I use and how many I have and so forth. So I thought I would do a short series of videos showing some of the decks that I possess, some of my favourite ones really, and I'm going to be doing probably about maybe between 5 and 8 decks per video, mainly because that's about all I have room to fit on my table here. So the ones that I have here at the moment are 8 decks that I usually keep sort of to hand, although I do change a couple of them from time to time. I change them over. So I'll go through them and I'll show you a few of the cards from each, and I'm going to start down here in the bottom left corner with probably my all-time favourite deck, which is the Robin Wood Tarot. Now, as you can see, I don't have the biggest hands in the world, but this is a nice sized deck for the hands. It has this beautiful pattern, sort of knotwork pattern on the back. And just to show you a few of the cards, we have the Emperor. You can see the colours are very, very rich and very, very sparkly, and they really stand out. For example, the Ace of Cups there, and the Ace of Swords, and just sort of even some of the darker cards are still beautiful. We have the Five of Cups, the Tower, of course. It is quite a Rider-Waite based deck. We have a lovely Fool card there, and Queen of Pentacles. It really is quite a fabulous, colourful deck by an extremely gifted artist. It has my all-time favourite High Priestess card. I've never yet seen one to quite match this one, and it's interesting the different feel you get. For example, the heat that you feel with this particular Three of Wands, and it has a lovely Seven of Pentacles as well. It follows, with the Seven of Pentacles, it follows that principle of stopping and looking where you're at, rather than the kind of failure or incompleteness that you get with a Thoth deck, which I also do have. A couple of Thoth related decks. Has a very interesting Hierophant. Really does make me think of, actually it makes me think of the Archbishop of Canterbury in England. It's a really, really fabulous deck. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is it is a sort of more pagan version of the Rider-Waite. It has a little bit less of the Christian style mythology in it. For example, this Devil card has no actual devil in it at all, except perhaps the Devil of Greed. And I'll just try to find the other one that really illustrates this point. It has a wonderful, wonderful Two of Swords. But the other one and there of course we have the Chariot and the Two of Cups. The one I'm particularly looking for is actually and I found it now, is the Judgment card, which is nothing like any Judgment card you'll see in any other deck. It's this kind of phoenix woman bursting out of a cauldron as if she's been reborn. She's very, very different to what you'll normally see with a Judgment card, and the idea of the sort of the angel calling people forth. Now, moving on and across, we have a deck which again is it's a little bit larger, but it still fits comfortably in the hand, and this is the Golden Dawn Magical Tarot. And there are a couple of Golden Dawn decks out there, but this one is amazing. It really is quite spectacular, but in a totally different way, because this is quite Thoth-like in its sort of the way it's put together. And what you also get with this is you get astrological and planetary associations as well. And as you will see, I mean, it takes no prisoners. This Queen of Swords has a head in the other hand, so it takes no prisoners. But it's a totally different, it's a sort of esoteric style of artwork, which is less of a story in a very sort of traditional painting kind of sense, and much more symbol based. But it is a favourite of mine. It also follows the idea of having princes, and then having, if I remember correctly, the strange thing is that the kings are sort of on horseback, which is again is a sort of a Thothian idea. I'm just trying to find one. Yeah, they're called kings in this deck, but they're on horseback. So it's kind of interesting from that point of view as well. And it's just it's a lovely arty deck, really, and I do very much like it. The pentacles are very interesting in this deck. I love the colours, I have to say, and each of the suits has a very distinct colour. The pentacles have this kind of brown and black colour. The swords have this sort of yellow colour. A wonderful Wheel of Fortune card. And then a very interesting tower. And of course, the world is the universe, which again is a very Thothian idea. And then, of course, you've got the sort of blues and greens for cups, and for wands, red. So it's another one of my absolute favourite go-to reading decks. Now, complete contrast in style is this one here, which again is quite a nice size for the hands. And this is the Norse Tarot by Clive Barrett. It has this fabulous busy knotwork on the backs. And this is a Viking or a Norseland style of deck. But as you can see, it's very pastely. The tower, totally different idea. This is showing the destruction of Bifrost, of the Rainbow Bridge. And interestingly enough, this has runes attached as well. This particular one being Hagal or Hagalaz, which is very much a rune of challenges and disruption and change. Very striking images. One of the few moon cards to feature a man actually there. The World card, of course, the god Balder. And again, we have that rune Man, which is mankind, which is all about the self and self-reliance. And some interesting takes on things as well. We have a very strong Queen of Wands. And the one thing that's slightly weird about this deck is the numerals. If you look at the top of this one, you can probably just about make out that it doesn't use the normal numeral system of IV for 5. It's I times 4. It's I in a sense. And this is the 4 of Wands, so we have that sort of idea of stability and solidity being created with these 4 beams holding up this roof. And then, of course, we have the Strength card, which is Tyre, binding Fenrir. And also we have the Rune of Strength, Ur, or Uruz, as well. A very, very unusual 2 of Swords as well. This is again following this idea of from the Thoth deck, I believe, of truce, and of basically putting aside your aggression and your animosity and doing something else instead. In this case, play chess. Really evocative Emperor card, but interestingly enough, this is not Odin. This is actually Tyr, who, in the way that Clive Barrett writes this, is an older sky deity who was ultimately supplanted by Odin, but stayed around as the god of victory. Beautiful Empress card. This, I believe, is Freya, and as you can see, it must be Freya because she's dressed as a Valkyrie, so it pretty much has to be Freya. Some interesting things with the aces as well. Well, I'll show you a couple of them. They're really kind of fascinating. Another really interesting one is the Seven of Swords, which has this sneaking around, trying not to wake the dragon kind of feel to it. And the High Priest, which is the Hierophant normally. This is Frey. And then Odin does appear. He appears in the Lovers. But he's always shown in this deck in the sort of wanderer kind of sense. And I'll show you there's the last one, the Magician, which is this whole idea of mysteries and kind of initiations with the rune attached, which is Peorth or Perthro. So he's shown in this kind of wanderer guise with the floppy hat. But it clearly is Odin because of the ravens and the wolves that are around him. So all in all, and Thor of course does feature in this deck as well. All in all, an absolutely fabulous deck and a very interesting one to read. Now, moving to another deck, if I can get to it, which is a very unusual deck, but it's a Rider-Waite clone with a difference. This here, again, nice size in the hand, and a beautiful starry back. This is the Morgan Greer, and it's Lloyd Morgan and William Greer, I believe, has a really unusual thing because it's borderless for a start, which isn't that unusual. But also, all of the cards, and you can see they have a slight Art Deco feel to them. All of the cards are zoomed in, so you get head and shoulders shots of all of the royals, all of the court cards, for example, Queen of Swords. The star, as you can see, very, very zoomed in. Hermit, even the Hermit is quite zoomed in by comparison to the sort of Rider-Waite. The Fool, as you can see, beautiful, beautiful way that they're done. And I do love the colours. There's the world. I do love the rich colours that we get with this. And we have the Ace of Swords, which interestingly, the laurel wreath forms a heart in this particular card, which I'm just noticing. It's one of those decks where you do suddenly notice things. As the Ace, which you can see is very Ace of Wands, very much like the Rider-Waite version. So it's a really interesting deck. We have the Eight of Swords. Follows the same sort of imagery, especially things like the Three of Swords here. But it is very, very zoomed in. One little detail is we actually have blood splatters down the sword blade here. And quite a nice Emperor card. There's one other that I'm going to look for in this deck, which is the High Priestess. Has a very interesting death card as well. But the High Priestess in this deck is also quite interesting because she's dressed in a very, very unusual way. The Devil card is also quite unusual. This is simply the sort of the goat's head, pretty much. If I can find the High Priestess. It's interesting. This is another interesting one on the Judgment card front. You know, the angel is not so obvious, I guess, within this deck. There she is. The High Priestess has this quite interesting garb. I guess that's possibly a throwback even to the idea of when the High Priestess was sometimes known as the Papess. Because it's slightly Pope-like in a way. Now, moving forwards, I'm going to go around this way because the next one I'm going to show you is the Shaman Caselli, and this is Juliet Sharman Burke and Giovanni Caselli, who is this very, very talented Italian artist. As you can see, the backs on this particular deck are extremely plain. This is yet another Rider-Waite style deck, but totally different feel. This one I always find is very, very... We've actually got a dwarf in this hit card, which is, or a gnome, which is kind of interesting. But this is a very whimsical looking deck, and very summery, I personally find. I mean, you look at a card like, for example, this is the Page of Pentacles, and it just has this heat to it, which I must admit I do like. The Death card kind of standing out as well. This time the Knight's not got his armour. It's so warm the Knight doesn't have his armour on. Fairly classic sort of 10 of Swords, and also 7 of Swords. And I'm not picking these out in any particular order. This is the High Priestess here, of this idea of this sort of demure maiden, almost, hidden behind a screen. But she obviously has a lot of knowledge within her. And she's very much, it's very much the idea of almost like a Delphic oracle in a way. Some very interesting cards. We have the Judgment card here. A very interesting 9 of Swords, with the swords actually pointing down at the poor girl in bed. And he has a thing for oversized horses. How on earth this child could control a horse that size, I do not know. How he could even get onto a horse that size seems near impossible. Fairly sort of standard 2 of Swords. It's just really a nice deck. The 3 is an interesting, 3 of Swords is an interesting one because it has this depicted as a stained glass window, which I rather like. And one thing I will probably show you in another video is the other Sharman Burke deck, which is when Juliet Sharman Burke decided to redo the Mythic Tarot, and instead of using Liz Green as the artist, she used Giovanni Caselli as well. And I know that caused quite a storm because people felt that it wasn't right to sort of redo the deck and change artists, but I do think that the redraw is very interesting. And I have been trying to get the original for a while. Now the next one is the Quantum Tarot, which has this sort of star field background to it. It's very much the same kind of size, as you can see, although slightly thicker. And this is very different. As you can see, this is the King of Cups, Neptune. It has astrological and astronomical even associations in this deck. And it is very much, this is the Hierophant. It has a very, very spacey feel. It is basically pictures of space. So we have the 6 of Pentacles here. And then we have the Emperor. It's a very, very unusual deck. Then we have the Knight of Cups. Just showing you a few cards. This is one of my favourites. It's the 9 of Wands. Absolutely fantastic deck. 2 of Pentacles, one of the few ones I've seen where the man is actually upside down. Totally beautiful deck. Absolutely amazing. Then we have, this is the Judgment card in this deck. So just showing you a few of these, because otherwise this video will take forever. It's a really interesting deck. Moving on now to something, as they used to say, completely different. Here we have one of only a couple of Gothic decks that I have. This one here with this beautiful rose on the back is the Tower of Vampires by Ian Daniels, and as you will see, it's very vampiric, but done in a very particular style. This is the Empress. Really beautiful cards. They call the suits are different as well. The wands are actually scepters in this deck. So we have the 6 of Scepters. The cups are grails, and this is the 4. The Sun card is fascinating. I haven't quite worked out all of this card yet. And this one does have the astrological associations as well, but you really have to look for them. This is the Hierophant, believe it or not. You might think it was the devil, but it's actually the Hierophant. And I'll try to find one where the astrological associations are easy to see. In this one here, we have Aquarius there, and then we have the planet Venus down here. You really do. This is five of knives. Knives are swords. Very much you have to look for them. The Priestess, rather than the High Priestess, we have the Priestess, whose magic book is just sort of floating by itself there. It's really, there's the Devil card, which doesn't leave you in any doubt really. And an amazing 8 of Grails, 8 of Cups, which, you know, always reminds me of something out of Lord of the Rings. It looks a bit like a Nazgul. Some beautiful aces as well. This is the Ace of Grails, or Ace of Cups. Really is one of my favourite decks. We have the Magician, who looks a bit like a rock star. Really just a fabulous deck. And one that I love. One of the cards I don't understand is Justice. All the elements are there. We have the scales up at the top. We have the sword down here. But it's a really strange image for Justice. It's one of the few ones I don't sort of, I suppose in a way, get. But, you know, you can't love every card. And interesting things, you get things like the 5 of Skulls. Skulls in this deck, by the way, are Pentacles, which is a sort of, I suppose, material loss. And what we have here is a vampire that's been defeated by a lichen. So we don't just have vampires in this deck as well, we have other creatures, and it has a really unusual Fool card. So that's the Tower of Vampires, which again is a favourite of mine. Even though I don't tend largely to go in for particularly Gothic decks, I only have a couple. And I'm going to show you the other one, if I can get to it, now. Because this one is larger, so I have to sort of pick it up in 2. As you can see, this one's very hard to hold. I have to hold this one this way. It has this amazing symbol on the back. And I actually had this converted onto a tarot bag for this deck. This is the Gothic Tarot by Joseph Vargo, who is also a musician. So if you want to check out Nox Arcana, they produce some really fascinating music. Now, this is the Magician actually summoning down the power from the heavens. This is one of 2 decks by Vargo and his wife, Christine Philippak. I believe she's his wife. And the other one is Madame Andora's fortune cards, which I do also have. And you can see the style of this is kind of difficult to describe. It's sort of almost cartoon-like, but it's very, it's got this very gothic, dark feel to it, but the colours are luminescent bright. Just, for example, the devil. And you do get these different colours as well, like this green in the devil. And yet the Empress has this sort of bluey white colour to her. And then of course this is the tower in this deck. It's a really unusual deck. And the Wheel of Fortune, this card is the most like the Madame Endora cards of any card in this deck. We have the Five of Cups, which is a sort of Alas Poor Yorick. Sort of a cross between that and the Raven, really. If you're familiar with Edgar Allan Poe's Raven. And sometimes you just get almost pips in a way. This is Two of Wands. And then, you know, it's quite fun that you get... I always think of this as almost like Morticia Addams. This is the Queen of Swords. So you do get some interesting things. The Fool is quite interesting because what we have, and I've read the book on this, is we have this spirit, this spectre, who is wearing a mask deliberately to hide his spectral face. This is the Fool card. And then the Sun card, which shows an eclipse. So it's a really... And then you get atmospheric cards like the Knave of Swords. It's a really interesting deck. And I'll just finish this one with the Lovers, which is there. So, fascinating deck. And just as I mentioned the Madame Endora cards, I have them out as well. They have this kind of funny backing on them. And just to show you a few of them, this is an Oracle deck rather than a Tarot deck. So they have a name on the top and then a meaning underneath. This is the Harlequin, the Satire, the Caduceus. You can see it's a very similar style. And then they have elements like air, seek a union of mind and spirit. They have a little phrase attached. Earth, the Sun, which could have been used in the Tarot deck, to be fair. Then Hindrance, which is a sort of fairy, or the Sphinx. It's a talisman. I mean, virtually every card in this deck is just beautiful. The Mystic Circle, which is very much like that Wheel of Fortune card that we had. So that just gives you a little... I'll probably do more of that deck in another video, perhaps in a video on Oracle cards. So, that's the first video. That's the first 8 of my sort of favourite tarot decks. And I will do other videos as well as time goes on. So you can have a look at some of the other decks that I have and that I love and that I read with regularly. And yes, I do have a Thoth and a Rider-Waite-Smith as well. So I will be including those purely as a sort of a historical thing. So, I do hope you've enjoyed this video on my card decks. Please feel free to leave me some comments and let me know what your favourite decks are. Perhaps do a video response showing me some. Have a great day, enjoy your card decks, and as always, love, light, blessings, and Friþ to you all.